Welcome back to Applied Behavior Analysis in Early Childhood. This is the last unit in the course, Domains and Dimensions of Behavior Analysis. And here are objectives for our first few objectives for this unit. Objective 1 is to list the 4 major domains of behavior analysis. Objective 2 is for you to identify and discriminate between examples of each domain in radical behaviorism. Identify the father of the experimental analysis of behavior, EAB, and the goal of the science. And Objective 4, to list and identify typical characteristics of EAB. Alright, so you will not be surprised at this point in the course when I say the father of the experimental analysis of behavior was B.F. Skinner. Alright, and this major domain of behavior analysis began with the publication of Skinner's book, The Behavior of Organisms, sometimes known as BOO, in 1938. And in his book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, written in 1971, Skinner said this of EAB: an experimental analysis of behavior offers certain advantages. When we have observed behavioral processes under controlled conditions, we can more easily spot them in the world at large. We can identify significant features of behavior and of the environment, and are therefore able to neglect insignificant ones, no matter how fascinating they may be. We reject traditional explanations if they have been tried and found wanting in an experimental analysis, and then press forward in our inquiry with unalloyed curiosity. The principles used in interpreting behavior have a plausibility which would be lacking in principles drawn entirely from casual observation. Okay, so what was Skinner saying there? Well, he was saying that if you, through very carefully controlled, systematic experimentation, you can identify and characterize fundamental principles of behavior or behavioral processes in a way that makes it easier for you to identify and then ultimately apply those principles or processes out there in the world, in the natural environment. And he was also saying that, that is unlikely to occur if we don't have a science of behavior. That we need a science of behavior to identify and characterize those principles of behavior. That just merely being in the world and casually observing what people do in the context where they do it, or observing events or situations in the world, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not going to enable us to identify, for example, functional relations between behavior and environment. We need a science, we need a methodology to do that. So the goal of EAB is to identify and characterize fundamental principles of behavior through prediction and control of behavior. In EAB, there's a focus on behavior in its own right and its environmental determinants, right, as a subject matter. So that's it. That's what we're focused on, just behavior and its environmental determinants. And it's like we don't pretend that other things aren't going on at different levels of analysis, but rather if our goal is to predict and control behavior, the best way to do that is to focus our science at behavior in the context where it occurs. That is, focus on its environmental determinants. So at that level of analysis, it's believed that we have a best chance of predicting and control behavior. You predict and control behavior, you can identify fundamental principles. You identify fundamental principles, then you can apply them in the apply behavioral technology later to solve real-world problems involving behavior. So EAB attempts to describe, but not explain, how behavior works. And now the flagship journal is the Journal of the Experimental Analysis of Behavior, also known as JAB. Okay, so when a scientist, either in the experimental analysis of behavior, EAB, or another major domain of behavior analysis, conducts a study, and they have a finding, they write a manuscript which describes the state of the knowledge base, or what was known before the experiment was conducted, and the purpose of the current study. And then they describe the participants and the methods, what was done in the study. Then they report the results, and then they discuss the results in the context of prior knowledge. They relate it to what was known before in the literature, and also the researchers will discuss how it extends prior research. In other words, what did they learn that's new, and then they will also identify research questions, new research questions that have been stimulated by the current research and the current findings, and then make recommendations for future research, and sometimes recommendations for practice. Okay, so so once they have that manuscript, they submit that to a scientific journal, and then it goes through a peer review process. And if the peer review panel agrees that it should be published, then they'll make that recommendation to the journal editor, and then the journal editor will make a decision whether to publish the study in that journal or not. And so once the study goes out in the journal, then it's available for consumption by the public. And then it can inform future research and practice. So the flagship journal, meaning the main journal for the experimental analysis of behavior, so that major domain of behavior analysis, is the Journal of Experimental Analysis of Behavior, JAB. Okay, and then lastly, EAB is also known as the field's basic research. It's another term thrown around. Basic research in behavior analysis is experimental analysis of behavior. Now here are some characteristics of EAB methodology. They include the use of an operant chamber, which allows for the highest degree of control over the environment. So that's a major advantage of EAB, is an extremely high degree of control over the environment, which enables the scientists, to control extraneous variables in the environment that aren't of interest, and then systematically manipulate independent variable while repeatedly measuring a dependent variable, some aspect of the organism's behavior, to determine the relation between that aspect of the behavior and the independent variable, some aspect of the environment. Another characteristic is automated recording, such as with a cumulative recorder. So in most cases, in EAB, the experimenter does not directly observe and record the organism's behavior, not anymore. Now it's all done automated through computer software. So, the organism is typically a rat or a pigeon, or a mouse is typically pressing a lever, pulling a chain, some other operandum in the chamber. A pigeon will peck a key light, and so forth. Okay, so another characteristic of EAB methodology is the repeated measurement of a dimensional quantity of behavior, selected based on convenience and reliability. So I don't mean the dimensional quantity selected for convenience per se, but the type of behavior, so lever pressing or key packing. Now, so these these responses are selected because they're easy to measure and they reliably occur. Very little special training, no special training in a sense is needed to teach a pigeon to peck a key light, and very minimal training is required to shape a rat's behavior to poke its nose in a hole in the wall of the chamber and obtain food, and to reach up and sniff and press a lever. Very minimal training is required. And then so the dimensional quantity is whatever quantity is of interest to the scientists or the researchers, so it could be rate or latency or duration or IRT. But in the experimental analysis of behavior, the rate of responding is the fundamental datum because of its relationship to response strength and the probability of behavior. Okay. Next, we have the systematic manipulation of antecedents, consequences, or both by the experimenter. And in most cases, the use of single subject design methodology. Okay, so you will see some research in behavior analysis, for example, in JAB, that uses group design methodology. But for the most part, single subject design methodology is the primary approach in EAB. And then G, here the last one, typically but not always uses non-human subjects. Alright, so let's go to some ASRs. A distinct advantage of the operant chamber over other experimental environments is A, the operant chamber offers less control over the environment. B, you can use single subject design methodology. C, the experimenter can more tightly control the events that occur in the organism's environment. Or D, all of the above. A few more seconds. Alright, I'll go ahead and close the poll. The answer here is C. The distinct advantage is that the experimenter has a great deal of control over the organism's environment. The operant chamber offers less control over the environment. That's not true. It's the opposite. And then you can use single subject design methodology. Well, it's true you can use single subject design methodology in experiments that utilize an operant chamber, of course. But that's not an advantage of the operant chamber. You don't need an operant chamber to use single subject design methodology. Okay, next ASR. Which of the following are goals of EAB? A, discovery of fundamental principles of behavior. B, characterization of fundamental principles of behavior. C, prediction and control of behavior. Or D, all of the above. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll go ahead and close the poll. The answer here is D, all of the above. Next ASR. EAB involves the repeated measurement of a dimensional quantity of behavior selected based on A, convenience and reliability, B, basic principles of behavior, C, how behavior works, or D, all of the above. A couple more seconds. Alright, I'll close the poll. The answer here is A, convenience and reliability. Objective 5 is to list and identify some characteristics of ABA research. 6 is identify the relationship between EAB and ABA research. 7 is list and identify some characteristics of ABA practice and some subdomains of ABA. 8, list and identify some characteristics of the conceptual analysis of behavior. And then 9 is identify the relationship between radical behaviorism and domains of behavior analysis. that does it for this video part, and I'll see you in video part 2, beginning with Objective 5.